This is a natural mistake that people make by analogizing between AI and humans. The only intelligence that we know is human intelligence, animal intelligence. So once we see a computer behaving in ways that seem intelligent, we can't help but project onto the computer all sorts of human characteristics that it just doesn't have, like ambition and the will to power and emotions and consciousness, etc., etc. None of this is there.
Hey, it's time to make online shopping personal. Bloomreach personalizes the e-commerce experience, unifying real-time customer and product data to understand what customers really want. By connecting all that understanding to every channel, the e-commerce experience becomes limitless. Amplified by Lumi, Bloomreach's AI for e-commerce, this creates endless new paths to purchase, greater profitability, and fast business growth. So give Bloomreach a try.
Hi, I'm Pedro Domingos. I'm a professor of computer science at the University of Washington in Seattle. I am an expert on AI and, in particular, machine learning. I'm originally from Portugal, got my PhD at UC Irvine back when hardly anybody else was doing machine learning. This was in the 80s. I've done a whole bunch of things in this field since. I've written a couple of books, one that called The Master Algorithm, introduced machine learning to a broad audience, turned into a surprise bestseller. And most recently, 2040, A Silicon Valley Satire, which, as the name implies, is a satire of AI in the tech industry and the politics and culture around it.
Yeah, I enjoyed the book. It reminded me a little bit when I was in high school. There was a book by a writer named Tom Robbins. Even cowgirls get the blues. It's kind of a crazy satire with a lot of wild characters, but with an underlying philosophical theme. Can you? I mean, I have a lot of questions about the book. For listeners, it's at a very high level about what happens when AI has advanced to the point that we have an AI candidate for president and all of the crazy things that devolved from that. But without going into the plot so much, I'm interested. The book is largely around the theme of control and lack of control and the danger of losing control of AI. I understanding this is a satire, but that's for 2 years now. That's been in the wind, and I frankly think it's exaggerated those fears, and I think regulation is moving along quickly, maybe because of the noise made by the research community, but it is moving along quickly. So, how much of the when it's satire, is it poking fun at those concerns, or are you raising those concerns?
Well, like all satire, it has an underlying serious intent. So 2040 is not about 2040 any more than Animal Farm is about animals or farming. It's about today. It's about 2024. And like a lot of classic science fiction, what it does is it extrapolates current trends to the point of absurdity. The thing that's kind of funny and maybe alarming in some ways is that, it's not, a lot of this stuff is not that far away. In fact, a lot of people's reaction to the book is, yeah, this seems so far out and over the top, and yet it's oddly realistic, like it could happen anytime. And in fact, I conceived of this book a few years ago, but then I decided I really need to publish this because before it becomes outdated, because so much of the stuff in it was coming true. So it's a short, quick read, but it actually covers a lot of things, right? So every element of the book is there for a reason. It's there to illustrate something about today's world of tech and AI and whatnot. And as you say, one of the key elements is what I think are the misguided fears about AI versus the real ones. So part of what the novel tries to illustrate with Prezibot, who's this AI candidate for president, just think ChatGPT runs for president. That's basically what it really is. And you can already see, the jokes coming one after another. is that the real danger is not Terminator or some evil AI taking over and exterminating us. The real danger is that the AI is imperfect. The AI screws up, it hallucinates, it has bugs, it needs fixed. The even bigger danger is that the humans developing and trying to control the AI are flawed humans, like we all are, and they screw up, they get into conflicts, and disasters happen without giving any spoilers. Those disasters are the result of the interaction of the flaws of the AI with the flaws and the intentions of the various humans, which I think is the real problem. And of course, what is always the real problem with technology is just that on AI it might be on a bigger scale than ever before.
Yeah, but where do you lie on that safety debate? Between Jeff Hinton and I don't know who.
Yann LeCun.
Yeah, and LeCun, yeah, they're the principals in much of the debate. Where do you lie in that on that spectrum?
I'm very much in agreement with Jan on most of this, and in disagreement with Jeff. I have a lot of respect for Jeff as a researcher, but as someone to take advice from about real world issues, he's not the first person I would turn to. And in fact, he's very honest about it. He says he never actually worried about any of these AI alarmist scenarios until recently. It was only when ChatGPT came out that he started thinking, "Oh wow, superintelligence is almost here, and then it's what it's going to do to us." And I think him and a lot of other people like him, they're making two mistakes at least. One is that superintelligence is not almost here by any means. And I think in the years since then, it's become increasingly clear that no, this AI still has a long way to go. Number one. But number two, and maybe less obvious, but in the longer term, more important, superintelligence is no extinction danger to humanity. This is a natural mistake that people make by analogizing between AI and humans. The only intelligence that we know is human intelligence, animal intelligence. So once we see a computer behaving in ways that seem intelligent, we can't help but project onto the computer all sorts of human characteristics that it just doesn't have, like ambition and the will to power and emotions and consciousness, etc., etc. None of this is there, and it won't be there unless we put it there. In particular, I think what we can and should and will do is we're going to develop AI. Remember, AI is under our control. We're going to develop it as an extension of our intelligence. It's not some other creature that is going to come and attack us. That is just a fantastical sci-fi scenario that unfortunately Hollywood has promoted heavily because it makes for successful movies. Like
Yeah, yeah,
people think of Terminator when they think of AI. If after reading the book, what they think of instead is Prezibot, then it has already achieved its aim.
yeah, yeah, and the whole Terminator scenario. What Because people talk to me about this all the time. Uh, they're talking about embodied AI, and they're really talking about advanced robotics, which have a really long way to go. I mean, there's some incredible things happening, and things have moved very swiftly in the last year or two, but it's going to be a long time before you have a robot that can navigate the messiness of the world, let alone take action in the world in a way that would be threatening to humans. But that's my view. The but the question of superintelligence. I mean, there's a lot of confusion, particularly in the public space, about that because uh, there is a lot of superintelligence already in AI. It's not this monolithic thing that we're going to reach someday. That when I think that where suddenly you wake up one morning and there's this AI system that's infected the internet and it's smarter than humans. I hear this from AI researchers in the alarmist camp that it'll be smarter than you. You won't be able to stop it because it'll be smarter than you. But but there is a lot of super intelligence already. I mean, I would argue that uh, you know th- that that a lot of the, like, for example, ChatGPT, within the bounds of its hallucinatory tendencies, is super intelligent. I mean, it has access to more information than I do. It's really a question of uh, how reliable it is. But let's move on from that. You're very critical of the Silicon Valley culture in the book. Yeah, can you talk about that a little bit? Because um, I'm on the East Coast. I'm not steeped in Silicon Valley culture, but it amazes me that you've got this concentration of billionaires in and around San Francisco that are creating uh, superhuman technology, even if it's not, consistent or across all domains. Yet they live in this. I'll probably get in trouble, but I lived in the Bay Area for a while. But this real cesspool of crime and homelessness and social dysfunction. And to me, that I keep on thinking, I should email Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. I mean, between them, they could solve the homelessness problem like that uh, with a fraction of their wealth. So, yeah, can you talk a little bit about that dysfunction?
So 2040, as the subtitle says, is very much a satire of Silicon Valley and the
Right.
culture of Silicon Valley around tech and around other things. And it has several elements. One of them is what you're referring to, which I'm always struck when I go there these days. There's such a contrast between the utopian high tech side and the dystopian. I mean, like in San Francisco, you see, the self driving cars go by on Market Street, or you're in one, and then behind them you see like these homeless people injecting and
Yeah.
lying sprawling on the ground and piles of trash and poop, and it's like it makes a neuromancer look like a children's story. It's
Yeah.
like, how could this happen? And again, part of the goal of a satire, and this one in particular, is to say, like, if we let this go on, like, where is this going to end, and how do we stop it? And so one of the elements of the satire is also there's this giant company called HappyNet,
Hmm.
which is the ultimate everything app, which exists in China, and every US tech billionaire wishes that's what they had. It's an app that does everything for you. And there's the headquarters, which is this super high tower, which is of course a caricature of the Salesforce tower, soaring high above the streets in San Francisco. And the CEO of this company looks down on the masses, and he says they're just pixels, and I can see the whole picture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Underground, there's a under San Francisco, there's a vast data center. It's there to minimize latency and blah blah. But then what Ethan, the protagonist, Ethan is the CEO of this kumbaya startup that created Prezibot, and at least in the beginning, he's the guy who nominally controls it. Then other things happen. But at one point, he discovers that this underground data center is full of homeless people squatting there,
Yeah. Yeah.
because life is better there. It's not as cold and it's more sheltered, and they're all these guys. There's robots,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that the surveillance cameras will not notice them, right?
Yeah.
So, and then again, there's multiple layers of commentary in this, but of course, part of the question is like, how did we wind up here? And I think the character, Dave Newell, who's the CEO of this company, of course, he's inspired by the Elon Musks and Mark Zuckerbergs and Jeff Bezos and whatnot of this world. And you say that they could solve the homeless problem, with a stroke of the pen. Actually, it's much more complicated than that. And again, I try to not, as much as it's a short book, I try to not oversimplify. And the homelessness problem in San Francisco and other places, it does not exist because of lack of money to solve it at all.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Even without the billionaires, we have put billions and billions of dollars, and the problem only gets worse. Right? It exists because, I mean, again, we could go into that, but it's more of a political problem than a technical problem. Part of what I spoof very much in this book is the technical people's naive notion that all these problems have tech solutions, right? The first chapter is called Optimize America with an exclamation mark,
Right.
because that's the slogan of the Prezibot campaign. And then they very quickly discover that things are a lot more gnarly than that, if you will, and they are.
Yeah, yeah. And when I said they could solve it, I wrote a lot of when I was at the Times about um, uh, the housing first policy. I don't know if you've read about it. This guy Tsambaris, who developed that during the Koch administration in New York, and it's been implemented in some places very successfully. And the thing that really prevents it from being implemented in larger cities is coordination between and among institutions. That you just can't get everyone on the same page, and as a result you end up with a fragmented system, and each one's trying to address a different aspect of the problem. um, but anyway, that's for another conversation. I mean, my view is if they if they would build housing for the homeless, that would be a leap toward a solution. But and certainly the tech billionaires have that money. You can't get it politically because the politics are so divisive that you can't come to a consensus. But yeah, and Ethan lives in this tiny little flat, which I thought was funny. It's that's more of a New York trope to me than San Francisco. I mean, San Francisco apartments are actually larger than New York apartments, but uh, yeah. So
That was, by the way, that was actually inspired by reality. In particular, the apartment that he lives in was inspired by a piece in 1843, The Economist lifestyle magazine, where they talked about, and they showed various ways in which San Francisco is so expensive now that it's becoming like Manhattan. And of course, it's also a tech mecca. So people are coming up with all of these ways to make ever smaller apartments have all
yeah,
the things in them that you need, including beds that rise into the ceiling and so on and
yeah,
so forth. And of course, that's what I'm making fun of in Ethan's apartment. Again, it's completely
yeah,
real, that part.
yeah. Uh, can you? I mean, the idea of technology as a decision maker is something that interests me. And geez, I got a fly down here. And is with agentic, which is a word I would never have used a year ago.
No
Uh,
one would have used it a year ago.
that's right. Models and with these reasoning models with Q Star or Strawberry or GPT-5 or whatever you want to call it, that next generation. Uh, the idea of models that can make decisions and take actions uh, is becoming closer to reality. To me, that's a very positive thing. Um, in the book, it's sort of the door to all the craziness. But how do you feel about that? And I have a question too. I had a conversation the other day about truth, and AI is a truth engine, which uh, was fascinating. But how do you feel about the potential for agentic reasoning AI models uh, to make decisions, maybe not autonomously, but certainly to aid in making decisions with humans to avoid some of the foibles that humans are prone to.
AIs make decisions. That's what they've done since the beginning. And there's a whole theory, which you study in AI 101, about how to make decisions optimally and how to do search for the best decisions, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is what classic AI is about. If you went to an AI conference in 1980, it was all about automated reasoning and decision making and planning and whatnot. Some of that is now forgotten, unfortunately, but this is what AI does. So AI, AI isn't really AI until it's making decisions about something. Now, the interesting questions are: number one, decisions in service of what goals? And this is one of the crucial things: is that like the difference between AI and an ordinary computer program is that the computer program at self level doesn't make any decisions. It just does what you told it to do in one situation or another. The difference with AI is that it does make its own decisions, but they are guided by the objectives that you put in. An AI system can never do anything that is not, by design, subserving that objective. And so this is unintuitive, and I understand people's fears, but you could actually have a super intelligence that is vastly more intelligent than us, but you don't have to fear it because it's at our service. The intelligence is just doing our bidding. Now, there's a second part, which is what happens when the AI starts actually taking actions in the real world, like, say, a robot versus ChatGPT. Now, of course, there are many risks that weren't there before. But again, the bigger risks is that the AI will do damage, like a self-driving car might run somebody over, right? The self-driving car is deciding whether to go left or right or stop or accelerate, and it can make mistakes. So those are the things that I think we really need to fear and I think we see some of that. It's interesting seeing how this is shifting, even in just the last couple of years, is that we have a tendency, and the book very much illustrates that, to prematurely put faith in AI as being more capable than it really is. Because
Yep.
again, the demos are very impressive. It looks very intelligent. Go like, oh wow, this AI is going to do all these things, and then it blows up in your face. So people are not, or you can jailbreak it and manipulate it. So the problem is not the AI manipulating the humans; it's very much the humans manipulating the AI. And I think even from just a year ago to now, by interacting with things like ChatGPT, people are coming to see, which I think is very healthy, AI as it really is, and what the real wars are versus the imaginary ones.
Yeah. Yeah. I had this conversation. There are a couple of things I wanted to ask you that sort of straying from the book a little. Uh, I've talked to people who believe that AI will be an arbiter of truth. And I don't believe that at all because truth is so subjective. I think the best that could happen is with a very carefully constrained model, you could produce evidence based consensus on any issue based on the training data. But how do you feel about that? About using AI to settle questions where the truth is unclear or hidden from a human observer?
I wouldn't use the expression AI as an arbiter of truth because arbiter is a very dangerous word. I don't think AI can or will or should have the final say on what is the truth. Having said that, AI can and should, and I hope will be, a fantastic tool to help us get closer to the truth. Very much so, because it can gather and process evidence on a larger scale than any human can. In particular, combining, again, in 2040, there are two versions of Prezibot. The first version is ChatGPT. The second version, and more interesting one, is a crowdsourced AI that in real time takes input from people and decides what is true and what to do and where to go and whatnot. This, I think, is the real role of AI, is to increase our collective intelligence and get us closer to the truth. Now, you can never get to the truth because it doesn't. This is one of the basic lessons in AI. It doesn't matter how much computing power or how much intelligence you have. Even just to play the game of chess optimally, you need a computer bigger than the universe.
Mm.
So the idea that some AI, again, this is part of people's failure of imagination, is like, oh, it's more intelligent than us, therefore it's infinitely intelligent. This is a complete mistake. Between our intelligence and God, right? There's a vast, vast, vast gap. And yes, AI will go beyond us, but it won't. AI is not going to do miracles. Now, unfortunately, what is happening right now is that AI, instead of getting us closer to truth, is actually arguably getting us farther from the truth. Because what happens with all the generative AI is that it makes stuff up. That's what
Yeah.
generative means. It means making stuff up. And so what it's creating is like these deep fakes, and even like the problem with ChatGPT, which you alluded to, that it's unreliable. Unreliable is that like ChatGPT, these LMs literally have no notion what is the truth. They just generate text that makes people happy, and that is similar to other text that people have generated. And that, in fact, does not get us closer to the truth, right? It's actually completely ungrounded, and not completely, because that language is again, at least some of it, right, is like is comes from, say, good reporting and so on, but most of it doesn't, and ChatGPT can't tell the difference.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but and right now it's purely probabilistic. So if there isn't, you know, uh, a probability curve that uh, centers on uh, sort of consensus about an issue, it'll come up with its own, based on whatever distribution is in the training data. Um, and um, if you had uh, clean enough training data, presumably that covered uh, enough of the world or intellectual thought, it would give uh, the consensus on any issue. I mean, you were talking before about the second iteration of Prezibot, which which is crowdsourced. I mean, the problem with the training data that is being used in a lot of these models, it's effectively crowdsourced, but the crowd is unreliable because uh, there's probably more uh, unintelligent or unintelligence within the crowd than there is intelligence for the AI to draw on. But I'm fascinated by the idea that you could either through uh, careful curation of training data come up with a system that could reliably answer questions that are facing um, humans or governments in real time. Is Prezibot and Prezibot 2 aside, is that something that you think is possible?
It's possible, and here's the big difference, or at least one big difference between Prezibot 1.0 and 2.0, is that Prezibot 1.0, like ChatGPT, it is learned from past data. And that data, by definition, is stale, not only because time has passed, but because you are not like the ChatGPT, right, is now answering something that it hasn't answered before. It's in a new dialogue. Prezibot is in a new situation. And then what it has to do, and this is really the crucial point, is that it has to generalize to the new situation from the ones that are in the text. And the
Mhm.
more different they are, the worse it gets, right? This is also true of humans, but humans are much better at generalizing from their experience to new situations than the best machine learning algorithms that we have today. And hopefully we'll get better algorithms. That's what I work on, for a living, if you will. But that aside, the difference between the crowdsourcing, you're right, like it's also crowdsourcing in the sense that it came from people, but this is crowdsourcing in real time, meaning like when there's a situation, what Prezibot 2.0 does, and actually technically today this is possible, is like it listens to millions of people saying what they know and what they believe and what should happen and making suggestions. And there are several examples of this in the book. And it can actually, this can actually work much, much better because it's taking input from our human intelligences in the moment about the actual situation, about doing some very far-fetched thing that will be unreliable and prone to hallucination and whatnot. And I think there's a lot to do to perfect that, but this is very much a possibility, and a very good one, that is being very neglected right now. And it's not just at the level of a president of the United States; it's at the level of a company, right?
Yep.
Again, the company that created Prezibot created as a demo to then tell CEOs to companies, right? And if you think about the job of a company or the CEO of a company, it's a lot of the decisions are very mundane. but it's screwing up all the time because it needs to do this for the customer. It needs this knowledge that actually somebody else has, but I don't even know that it has. And I'm handing it off from one customer service rep to another, to the chatbot, to like, there's this hell that people live in, and AI can overcome that.
Yeah. Do you think that the risks that AI governance, and we've seen, as I said, a lot of activity, the Europeans are working hard to protect the consumers, and the U.S. is relying more on existing institutions. But do you think that the governance is keeping up? Because one of the themes in the book is that this race for innovation in Silicon Valley is throwing us blindly into danger. But I kind of think that the regulation is a pretty fast follower. What do you think?
The Where to start? One of the central plot elements in 2040 is Prezibot's panic button. The panic
Right.
button is the kill switch of the AI, and this is a real thing. People have proposed having kill switches. There are research papers on having kill switches. I would not be surprised at all if a bunch of regulations in various countries demand kill switches. And so Prezibot has a kill switch, which is in the hands of Ethan, the CEO of the company. And then Ethan loses the kill switch. And then the fun begins. And of course, this is, again, there is a fun element to that, of course, of the chaos that ensues and the people fighting over it and so on. But this is making a real point. And the point is, these measures that you put in place to make AI safe, if you're not careful, make it less safe. And kill switches are a good example of that, right? Kill switch is like the ultimate guarantee against Terminator, but actually it's nothing of the kind. It's just another vector by which chaos can come in. And all of these regulations are, let me put it this way, the real problem in AI is who controls it.
Yeah.
And the kill switch, in a way is the embodiment of that in 2040. And then the realization that he has is, instead of having people fight over the kill switch, I should give everybody one, because this is a democracy. So the kill switch originally is an app that Arvind, the CTO, and his friend coded up quickly, that literally has a red button that you push, or that you can use it to talk. You can talk through Prezibot. What they
Right.
do, right, because they're very short of time, is they let everybody. They call it Prezi app. They create Prezi app, and anybody can push the button and talk into Prezi app. And then, of course, the interesting question becomes, when there's 20 or 100 million people talking into Prezibot at the same time, right? What does the AI do? And you alluded to, like, it will reflect the consensus view. Well, maybe when there's a consensus, but often the problem is that there is no consensus.
Yeah. Or that the consensus is misguided, as we saw. I don't know how you feel with Brexit, which, you know,
Brexit is a great example. So Brexit actually won by a fairly slim margin. And if the bunch of people who didn't bother to vote, particularly the young people, had bothered to vote, it would have gone in a different direction.
right.
And now today there's a great majority, I don't know, 60 something percent, last that I saw, or something in that range, of British people who regret Brexit. And I would
Sure.
say that one of the primary roles of the AI, and again, this is what we do in machine learning, is to try to see ahead and try to guide us, not decide for us, but say, look, this is what you want, and you think that Brexit will give it to you. Here's maybe why it won't. Look at like we want to deregulate Britain and be free from all that European Union red tape. Like, we knew that wasn't going to happen. We want to stem immigration and whatnot. There's less immigration from Europe. There's more from other sides. Like, none of that really. So that's why it has turned out badly. But a good AI could actually have seen this, and and among other things, alerted people to this. And again, another thing that I think should happen, and again, the book alludes to, is people often don't have time for politics, even though it's very important. But you could deputize your model to represent you.
Mhm.
Your model with your authorization, based on whatever data you want, is a better representative of you for the decision making than your member of parliament or your member of Congress, right? For two reasons. One is that it doesn't have the cognitive limitations that the members of Congress do, but even more important, it doesn't have the conflicts of interest.
Right.
So what you can have is, instead of 400 people deciding for the 300 million of us, what you can have is 300 million models that would have a much more interesting argument going back and forth about any issue that you care to decide about. I think we're going to look back on what we have today as barbarism.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And that's actually to the idea of a truth engine. Uh,
Exactly.
right now, the models, you can easily manipulate them through prompts to say anything you want. But if you had, 100 flowers blooming, to use the Maoist phrase, and all of these AIs debating to the point of convergence, yeah, that maybe that's the closest you could get to optimal decision making or the truth. Um, the public. I saw a survey just recently how public perception of AI is at an all time low. I mean, in the short time that people have been thinking about it, because their experience of it has been frustrating and glitchy, and then layered on top is all of the alarmist media. Do you think that in the way the social media uh, insinuated itself into society uh, in a way that a lot of people didn't understand while it was happening, and now everyone recognizes uh, the evils, frankly, of social media, the way it's managed today? How do you see AI integrating into society? Do you think, because I see the same thing. I mean, people, you think about it. A lot of the people I talk to think about it, but I go camping upstate with, you know, some buddies who, are construction workers or that sort of thing. They have no clue. And frankly, they don't want to know. But I keep telling them, this stuff, it's going to impact your life, or at least your children's lives. So are you optimistic about that integration? I mean, certainly in the book it doesn't paint a very optimistic picture. And what do you think has to happen for it to integrate in a healthier way than social media did?
I think the first thing that people should realize is that AI has been part of their lives for decades now.
Yeah.
AI has been doing the most important application of AI in the world today by far is not chatbots. Chatbots, for the most part, are entertainment, or they do mundane things like generate vacuous text or text that doesn't need to have a very high standard, etc., etc. The most important application of AI today is things like recommendation systems. It's
Right.
making choices for you from the vastness of the infosphere. It's giving you search results, choosing movies and books and music and whatnot for you to consume. It's Amazon product recommendations. The tweets that you see, the posts on social media, they are all selected for you by AI.
Right.
So I'm not surprised that people have this negative view of AI right now, because most people have only recently become aware of AI. And what they see, as you say, is, on the one hand, the crap that it generates. On the other hand, all the alarmist fears. I
Yeah.
think the antidote for this, and I think it will happen, but we have to make it happen, because, as you say, there are multiple forces pushing in the other directions. Like, people have to get to know AI better, and they are in some ways getting to know AI better. For example, the incompetence of AI actually runs counter to the Terminator fears.
Mhm.
The whole thing, like, oh, we need a moratorium of AI before a disaster happens, now is ridiculous. People are like, what, chat GPT? So, but we tend to veer between those two poles. So we have to keep making AI better. That's for us, the engineers and the researchers. But we also have to in some ways enlist people to use AI for their benefit. This is how I think the key. This is how AI can and should and will permeate society. Is not we have these closed AIs belong to these large companies that do a bunch of stuff under the hood. It's like a car shows up at your door with no steering wheel and says, "Get in, I know where you want to go."
Yeah.
Wouldn't
Yeah.
you rather drive the car yourself? Well, in
Yeah.
order to drive the car yourself, you need two things. You need to demand that the car have a steering wheel and pedals, because there's no reason. They're there. They're just not exposed to you. So that's number one. And then number two, you have to learn to drive. So this is what I want to encourage people to do: is to demand a car with a steering wheel, and number two, learn to drive.
Although, you know, certain things will simply go away as obsolete or interesting. For I mean, when I hear people complain about AI, oh, I'm never going to use AI. I didn't ask for it. You hear that all the time. I didn't ask for it, and I always say, well, when was the last time you used a paper map to get somewhere? Uh, and people don't really understand that that's AI. And in the way that paper maps are pretty much obsolete now, maybe steering wheels and accelerator and brake pedals will be obsolete. I don't know. It's I'm of the as much as I enjoy driving, um, I can imagine a day where driving is a little bit like people that drive stick shift cars today. It's kind of a, a choice that's unnecessary, but they enjoy it.
No, just to clarify, I wasn't literally talking about self-driving cars. I understand the confusion. I was using cars as a metaphor for control of AI.
I see. Yeah. Yeah.
AIs, so I talk about this in my previous book, The Master Algorithm. AIs have the equivalent of a steering wheel, which is the objective function.
Right.
It's the metric that they're trying to optimize. It's the means by which we control the AI. And I think the discussion around AI should be focused on what the metrics should be. Should those metrics just be set by the company? Should there be a component that is mandated by law to be for the social good? And that there should definitely, I think, be a major component, the biggest one, which is under the control of you, the user. So this is what I metaphorically mean by the steering wheel of the AI.
Right.
And I think people are over time, they it's very good that people are now aware of AI as AI. And I think it's incumbent on us, the experts, to try to educate people. Educate is kind of a heavy word, but like try to get people about what AI really is and what it is. At the end of the day, to quote Karl Marx, it's all about who has the power. AI will change society in the direction of the people who use it better. So, do you want that to do?
Yeah.
You never asked for AI, but that is a very dangerous proposition, right? It's like Henry Ford said: if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have asked for faster carriages, faster horses, right? Imagine trying to do anything with horses today, competing with someone who has a car, right?
Yeah.
So we all need to start thinking about how to use AI in our jobs to automate some of the tasks, but not all, because that's usually what happens with AI in our private lives, right? One of the biggest roles of AI today is in recommending matches, right? There's people who were born because AI matched their parents. Two, as a citizen, right? How can you use AI to inform you better, to represent you in all our decision processes, et cetera, et cetera? And honestly, the people who do that will have power, and the ones who don't do that will not have power. So which one do you want to be?
Yeah. You're right. The If you were to sum up what are the like three messages in your book?
I would say that the first message is that AI is Prezibot, not Terminator. When you think of
Right.
AI, think of an imperfect human creation that is being debugged, that is a work in progress, and don't when you look at AI, see through the AI to the people controlling it. AI is this kind of like it's like mirror shades, right? You don't see the eyes behind it. You got to think about the people staring at you on the other side of the AI. That I think is the first message. And if people just get that one message, that's already great. The second one, which comes on the heels of that, and is what Prezibot 2.0 illustrates, is if you now think of AI as an imperfect artifact that is a collective creation of a bunch of people, what do you want it to be? What do you want to do with it? Let us start perfecting democracy using AI. That's what Prezibot 2.0, on a good day, of course, some things do go wrong because there's still pitfalls, is a better form of democracy. It's overcoming this trade-off between representative and direct democracy. And we need to do that because autocracies are using AI to perfect themselves, right? And the third message I would say is more to do not with AI in particular, but with the tech world and with politics and whatnot, which is there's you see this so much today. And again, it's one of my motivations for writing the book is that the tech people start out with a very naive notion that this technology is going to make the world better. Okay, and it's super naive. It is,
Yeah.
right? But then what happens, and like the last 5 years, AI has just been hit with this, is that as soon as a technology starts to make a difference in the real world, everybody scrambles for control of it. So, for example, there are a lot of people trying to make, and this honestly chills my blood, trying to make machine learning systems learn models of what the world should be instead of what it is like. I'm going to like people let Google do this right now. They will alter, for example, the gender ratios of professions and whatnot to make it look like what the world should be. To make there
Yeah.
be like I'm making up the example, but it's a real one. Like 50% of programmers are women. And I'm
Yeah.
like, no, the goal of the machine learning is to tell the truth, going back to your earlier question. And then on top of that, we can have whatever decision processes and objectives we want, but do not create an Orwellian world on the back of AI.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
very much so like it's very important that we be aware that this is going on. Right now, AI is creating a world for you that makes these choices and creates an imaginary world that is different from the real one. And it's like 1984 but taken to a whole different level. And people, again, if all that the book does is make people aware of this and make them start thinking about it, that's already great.
Yeah. Uh, what are you working on now? I mean, now that the book's out or on its way out, are you still doing research? Are you going to become a novelist?
Uh, I'm sadly not going to become a novelist. This was more a fun thing that I did on the side, and also because I thought it was worth it. But it was really uh, almost like a hobby, right? I'm not a novelist. I know a lot of artists that I have a lot of respect for, and I'm more of a scientist, right? I have more of an analytical
Sure.
mind as opposed to a synthetic one. Part of what made me write this book was that in an earlier time, I actually learned to write science fiction. I went to this
Yeah.
famous thing called the Clarion West Writers Workshop that a lot
Yeah.
of the biggest names in science fiction that come from. And I know the basics of how to write fiction, but at the end of the day, I'm a scientist, and my main occupation in the last several years has been doing research. This is what I'm spending most of my time on, and going forward, this is what I'm going to spend even more of my time on. I intend to write more books, but I have lots of ideas of novels to write, but you got to prioritize. And the books that I'm going to write after this are going to be nonfiction ones. Now,
Yeah.
the main thing that I'm working on right now and have been is better learning algorithms, is better AI, is precisely AI that doesn't hallucinate. It's AI that's reliable. It's AI that generalizes farther than the current AI can because maybe it uses some of the things that people do. And in particular, going back to my previous book, The Master Algorithm, I believe that to really solve the AI problem, you really need to combine the key ideas from the different paradigms. The two main ones being symbolic AI, which can reason, and neural networks, which can do other things but not reason. You really need a very deep integration of them, and I'm making very good progress in that. So we'll see where it goes. Also, because to really make this, a lot of this was motivated by this dream, if you will, that goes back 20 years that I have of this crowdsourced AI, of this collective intelligence, of mass collaboration supported by AI. And in order to do that, something like GPT is not enough. We actually do not
Yeah.
quite have the technology to do. We have technology to go way beyond where we are today, but we don't quite have the technology to go all the way, precisely because people will contradict each other, and there'll be a lot of crap basically, and the AI needs to know how to deal with that. And
Right.
symbolic AI doesn't know how to do that, but then the neural AI doesn't know how to reason with that. So we do need progress on a very on a scientific level to do this, but I think we're getting there.
Yeah, and don't you think that with all the hints coming out of OpenAI that's going to be their next model, at least a step toward that reasoning neural network?
Uh, Great question. So I don't know what Q star or Raz or Strawberry are, but knowing a bunch of people at OpenAI, including some of the people working on this, I think that very much trying to add reasoning capabilities is the key direction to go, and making the AI more reliable. They understand this very well, and they're working on it. Now, what I see them doing, I don't think is going to get them there.
Hmm.
They have a particular type of person in the company, very much the hacker type. Again, this is what I'm making fun of in 2040, is the hackers thinking they're about to solve AI by hacking. And, hacking has a place. And so the scaling and whatnot, it's not trivial. But I don't think that I don't think you're going to get to this kind of AI or AGI or superintelligence or human level AI, what you're going to call it, just by tweaking transformers. And the funny thing is that Sam Altman also thinks that. He just doesn't say that these days. But 2 years
Yeah.
ago, you actually have, it's on it's on record of him saying, like, yeah, I don't think Transformers are going to do it. But of course, now he needs to sell what he has. So
Yeah.
I don't think that, for all their good intentions, OpenAI is the most likely player to get to this. They have some people. DeepMind has more. As a research lab, I think DeepMind is vastly better than OpenAI, not even close. But also, I think, and people, this is very neglected today. The great majority of AI research today still happens at universities.
Yeah.
The Googles and the Metas and whatnot and the Microsofts get all the publicity. But if you just look by the amount of research, and in particular, you look at the research that is less short term, it's overwhelmingly coming from the universities. If I had to guess, where is this going to come from for these various reasons? It's probably not going to be one of those labs. It's going to be, some grad student.
Do you follow Rich Sutton's work? He and he's involved with John McCormack, or is it Cormack, the coder from the gaming industry. They have he's got a startup called Keen, and I'm just curious whether you followed that. It's sort of trying to get to AGI through reinforcement learning.
So I have known Rich for a long time. He's an interesting character. He's, of course, the most important person in the world in reinforcement learning. When I was writing the master algorithm, I actually asked a bunch of my colleagues, so do you believe in this notion of a master algorithm? The master algorithm is one learning algorithm that can learn anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was a spectrum of opinion from, people say, like, no, that's never going to happen, to, various ideas. But the two people who most strongly believed in the notion of the master algorithm were Jeff Hinton and Rich Sutton.
Oh.
And this is not a coincidence, right? They are the leaders of their schools of thought, right?
Right.
Of course, their idea of what the master algorithm is was very different. The master algorithm for Rich is reinforcement learning. And in fact, in an early discussion that I had with him, years ago now, I was like, well, I was pointing out, like, the thing about reinforcement learning is that it's very intuitive, but it keeps not working. This has been the case even now, right? DeepMind came to prominence with deep reinforcement learning, right? But that actually hasn't gone anywhere. Unfortunately, I wish it had, right? And so I was, I kind of quizzed, Rich about some of this. And he said, like, well, but, reinforcement learning doesn't have to be that. It can be something else, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, sure. So what is reinforcement learning? And Rich says it's whatever works.
Yeah.
So when something finally works, he'll call it reinforcement
Yeah.
learning. That's okay, right? But
Yeah.
that doesn't answer the question of what to do now. And to get more concretely to what I think are their chances of success. So there's the sequential decision making problem, and that's what human intelligence solves, and that's what AI has to solve. Which is why I think a lot of the people who do want to get to human level AI are so attracted to reinforcement learning. But reinforcement learning is one approach to the problem of sequential decision making. And at the end of the day, I don't think, I could be wrong, I don't think that's the solution. Because the core of reinforcement learning is this notion that, like, you make some decisions now, and then you only get rewards much later. Like, I make a move in the game of Go, and then only 100 moves later do I win or lose the game. And the whole idea of reinforcement learning is to propagate that result back to the present time. But what has happened over and over again since the 80s, since the field began, is one of two things. Either the rewards are fairly frequent and close to your actions, and in that case, you don't need reinforcement learning because you can just do supervised learning, right? Every time we see a success of reinforcement learning, most recently with things like training chatbots to give answers that people like, so-called reinforcement learning from human feedback, it immediately turns out that actually this was just supervised learning, or you could do just as well as with supervised learning. Or If the rewards truly are delayed and sparse, it just doesn't work. So
Yeah.
I'm waiting for Rich to solve that problem. I hope that he does, but so far I haven't seen anything to convince me. Of course, there's also his famous paper about the bitter lesson that
Right.
what really works is more data and scaling, which I think is not the complete truth, but it's a very interesting statement
Well,
coming from him.
it got us ChatGPT, which blew everybody's mind. So
Well, but here's the thing: like it's um, this is a misunderstanding that people have that is a very natural one. Scaling was one of the things that got us ChatGPT before OpenAI and actually Google before them, and then Sundar screwed up, but that's another story. Before the whole run to scale up happened, which is what is happening now, and I'm all for, there were a whole series of things that had to happen, such
yeah,
that then scaling is the last element for this thing to really take off. And really, those things were much more important than actually even scaling. You had to have GPUs, right? You had to have embeddings. You had to have back propagation, right? The
right.
algorithm that drives all of this is back propagation was invented in the 80s by some definition, maybe even earlier, but uh,
Yeah.
that's the standard story by a psychologist modeling child development and children's language learning. So there's like a whole series of things, and you can't, it's easy just to like, oh, the scaling did it. No, very much the goal of my research. I spent the first part of my career working on scaling, and then I realized mathematically that the algorithms that we have, no matter how far we scale them, will still not be that smart. So you got to have the people working on scaling, but you also got to have the people developing the newer generation of algorithms that you can then scale. A human brain is not a scaled up ant brain. So I think just scaling, contra that story of the bitter lesson, isn't going to get us there. However, there is an element of truth in it, which we have learned repeatedly in AI that what tends to work well, and this is really the notion behind the master algorithm, is actually simple algorithms coupled with a lot of data and a lot of compute. It's amazing how powerful that is, as opposed to very clever solutions designed by very clever people.
Hey, it's time to make online shopping personal. Bloomreach personalizes the e commerce experience, unifying real time customer and product data to understand what customers really want. By connecting all that understanding to every channel, the e commerce experience becomes limitless. Amplified by Lumi, Bloomreach's AI for e commerce, this creates endless new paths to purchase, greater profitability, and fast business growth. So give Bloomreach a try.